In every corner of the world, there are secrets, stories that exist beyond understanding, patiently waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. And today, we've come to do just that, to venture into places where darkness never ends. Welcome to Dynamic Dark. Welcome to a brand new horror episode. Welcome to episode 29. I'm Aditya, and today I bring you 3 terrifying haunted stories. New stories. New week. New fears. If you are new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable the notifications bell if you dare to see what comes next. Today, we'll explore 3 haunted stories, each horrifying in its own way. The first story, The Last Download. The second story, The Whistling Shadow. The third story, The Forgotten Photo. If you love horror like this, you are in the right place. Only on Dynamic Dark will you experience creepypasta-style horror blended with real psychological and haunted elements. For the best experience, put on your earphones or headset and let the darkness, suspense, and fear consume you. Now let's begin today's first story, The Last Download. He had always been curious, maybe too curious. Nights were when he felt alive, hours spent diving into the deepest corners of the internet, places most people never even knew existed. Hidden forums, abandoned websites, threads that disappeared the moment you tried to revisit them. It was a digital world forgotten by most, except by those who sought the unknown. It was there, in one such forgotten forum, that he found it. A game. No name. No reviews. No instructions. Just a single, cryptic warning. Play offline or regret it. At first, he laughed it off. He had seen all kinds of strange things online, games that scared people for a moment, horror videos, fake creepypastas. But something about this, it was different. The warning was simple, yet it held a weight that pressed against the air in his room, heavy and palpable. He stared at the screen. The glow of the laptop cast shadows across the walls, flickering in rhythm with the storm outside. Rain tapped against the window like impatient fingers. Thunder growled in the distance. For a moment, he imagined that the storm itself was a warning, that the shadows moving along the walls were alive, watching him, testing him. Curiosity won. Of course it did. It always did. He clicked the download link. The moment he did, the lights in his room flickered. A chill ran down his spine, making the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. The wind outside seemed to whisper, carrying voices that were just not human. Or maybe they were human, distorted, and warped, layered beneath the normal sounds of the storm. As the download completed, he hesitated. His hand hovered over the trackpad. Part of him screamed to shut the laptop, to unplug it, to walk away, but another part, darker, insistent, almost alive, urged him forward. He opened the game. The screen flickered again. Strange symbols, shapes that seemed almost alive, pulsed briefly before vanishing. And then he saw it, an opening screen, simple yet unnerving. It felt like it was watching him, evaluating him, understanding him. He tried to laugh, nervously, telling himself it was just a game. But the room was colder now. The shadows seemed to stretch farther than they should. A subtle pressure pressed down on him from above, and the sense of being observed settled over him like a heavy blanket. He leaned back, taking a deep breath, trying to convince himself that it was all imagination. But then, a faint sound. Almost like a whisper, a soft exhale, brushing against the back of his ear. He froze. The sound came again, this time, almost like breathing, deliberate, slow, patient. And in that moment, he realized he was no longer just about to play a game. Somehow, the game had already started playing with him. His world, his room, even the storm outside, it all felt connected. And lurking somewhere in that connection, something was waiting. Asterisk. At first, the game seemed harmless. Simple puzzles, small taps, little challenges that made him smile nervously. He laughed at how innocent it looked, just a game, nothing more. But then, he noticed something strange. Each action he took in the game seemed to echo in his own apartment. A cup on the counter rattled the exact moment he completed a level. The clock ticked in perfect sync with the timer on the screen. He shook his head, trying to convince himself it was coincidence. But the feeling of being watched, that didn't go away. He leaned closer to the laptop. The glow illuminated the room, but the corners felt darker, heavier. Thick, black shadows seemed to cling to the walls, static yet horrifying, taking weight, ghostly forms like massive, looming figures just waiting. Their presence pressed on him, making his skin crawl, though they didn't move. He tapped another puzzle. The floorboards creaked behind him. He turned, nothing. Just the shadows. But the shadows felt different now, heavier, almost anticipatory, as if they were waiting for him to make a mistake. The game's puzzles became stranger. Symbols that seemed normal at first now twisted into shapes that looked like faces screaming silently, eyes hollow, mouths gaping. He tried to shake it off, but every solution he tapped was mirrored by subtle, inexplicable changes in his room. A picture frame tilted slightly, a faint scratching sound coming from the walls, the lights flickering in a rhythm that matched the game's levels. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. Each tap, each puzzle solved, brought a heavier, oppressive feeling. The shadows in the corners grew darker, almost solid, like thick smoke, yet unnervingly human in their vague shapes. Sometimes he could swear he saw a hand reaching toward him, then vanish when he blinked. He tried to step back from the screen, but curiosity held him. The game wasn't just a game anymore. It was a test, a warning, and he felt himself slipping into it. Every puzzle solved tied him tighter to this creeping, unseen force. The line between his room and the game blurred. He could feel it now, something patient, watching, waiting, controlling. By the time he looked up from the laptop again, the room felt alien. Familiar objects were just slightly wrong. Shadows lingered even in places they shouldn't. And in the deepest corner of the apartment, the thick black forms pulsed faintly, like the dark heartbeat of the game itself, reminding him that he was no longer just playing. The game was playing him. Asterisk. At first, he didn't notice anything unusual. The game was simple, innocent looking, and he thought the eerie feeling was just his imagination. But then, small things began to happen. A cup on the kitchen counter trembled slightly, then toppled at the exact moment he solved a puzzle in the game. The sound echoed in the empty apartment, sharp and unnatural. His heart skipped a beat. He shook his head, blaming coincidence. But the pattern repeated. A clock ticked in perfect sync with the game timer. A picture frame tilted just as the game displayed a warning icon. Something or someone was watching. He could feel it. Not like a shadow lurking in a corner, but a presence that pressed down on him, patient and deliberate. Thick, black shapes loomed in the corners, almost static, yet radiating a terrifying awareness, like they were waiting for him to falter. He tried to ignore it, turning away from the laptop. But in the reflection of the darkened window, he thought he saw movement, a vague silhouette, tall and black, standing just behind the couch. He blinked. Nothing. The room was empty, yet his skin crawled as if the shadows themselves were breathing. Objects continued to react. The floorboards creaked in rhythm with the game's airy sounds. Every click of the mouse, every solved puzzle, seemed to trigger subtle, sinister events around him. Even the air felt heavier, thicker, as if saturated with a dark energy that clung to his skin. The game's symbols now twisted into grotesque shapes, hollow faces, clawed hands, and unrecognizable forms that seemed to mock him. He wanted to stand up, to leave, but curiosity held him frozen. The black shadows in the corners seemed to pulse slightly, like the heartbeat of the room was tied to the game itself. By now, he realized it wasn't just mimicry. It was communication, a warning, a manipulation. The boundaries between his apartment and the game blurred. Every action he took, every puzzle he solved, fed this unseen presence, and the presence was growing. It was patient, calculating, and aware of him in ways that terrified him beyond reason. And then, a whisper. Just faint, almost imperceptible, brushing his ear like a cold breath. He froze. The black shadows seemed to lean slightly, solid yet menacing, as if confirming it was listening, waiting, and he was trapped in a game far beyond his understanding. Asterisk. Every completed level made reality bend further. At first, it was subtle. Street lights outside flickered oddly, their glow pulsing in sync with the game's airy sounds. He shook his head, trying to convince himself it was coincidence, but a creeping unease settled deep in his chest. Voices began to whisper from empty corners, soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the hum of his apartment. But as he progressed, the whispers grew clearer, snippets of words, half-formed warnings, unintelligible and chilling. They seemed to come from the thick, black corners of the room, from the massive ghosts that now loomed in every shadow. His reflection in the darkened window wasn't always his own. Sometimes the eyes staring back were hollow, sometimes the face distorted, twisted, slightly delayed, like it had a mind of its own. Each tap on the laptop made the reflection shift further, sometimes smirking, sometimes screaming silently. The fog on the floor thickened, curling around furniture and the edges of the room, occasionally obscuring ghostly forms. Massive, black ghosts with twisted humanoid shapes hovered in corners, emerging from the fog, then retreating slightly, always present, always menacing. Some had clawed hands, others had vague faces, some were half-formed torsos, each different, each terrifying, moving only enough to remind him they were alive. Objects around him responded to his actions. A cup teetered and fell in sync with a puzzle solved. A chair tilted. The clock ticked unnaturally, all mirrored by the game's progression. The apartment felt like a living entity, bending to the game's will. He could feel it in his chest, a pressure building, making it harder to breathe, as if the room itself was aware of him. Outside, street lights blinked faster, casting long shadows that twisted and merged with the creeping fog inside. The wind rattled the windows, carrying faint whispers of laughter or cries that made his skin crawl. Every sound, every movement seemed deliberate, tied to the unseen presence in the room. By now, he realized the game wasn't just digital. It had crossed into his reality, and every completed level strengthened its hold. The thick, black ghosts pulsed slightly, solid and massive, dominating the room, their forms more terrifying than before. He could see them in different angles, some partially emerging from the fog, others standing near the ceiling, faces twisted, eyes hollow, arms outstretched as if reaching for him. He wanted to stop, to close the laptop, to run. But his hands were frozen, mesmerized, drawn deeper into the game. The line between virtual and real had vanished. Each completed level worked the room further, bending time, space, and perception itself. He was trapped, every corner haunted, every shadow alive, every action feeding the dark force that waited patiently, watching, calculating, and slowly consuming him. Asterisk. He frantically tried to delete the game, fingers trembling over the mouse, heart hammering in his chest. Every attempt failed. The screen flashed a chilling message, "You are offline now, forever." His stomach dropped. Panic gripped him, spreading like ice through his veins. The apartment seemed to shift around him. Walls stretched slightly, corners darkened unnaturally, and the fog on the floor thickened, curling like living smoke. Massive, thick, black ghosts emerged from every corner, hovering near the ceiling, leaning over tables, solid and menacing. Each one was different, some had clawed hands, others twisted faces, some partially formed torsos, others fully humanoid, but all radiated an overwhelming, terrifying presence. Objects reacted violently. Cups toppled, chairs slid across the floor, and picture frames crashed to the ground in sync with the laptop's flashing warnings. His reflection in the window flickered and split into multiple distorted versions of himself, each staring back with hollow, accusatory eyes. The laptop glowed brighter, symbols twisting into grotesque, unreadable forms that seemed alive. The boundary between the game and reality was collapsing. Outside, street lights woke and blinked erratically, shadows crawled unnaturally, and the fog seemed to reach beyond the apartment, touching the streets themselves. The ghosts moved subtly, still massive and heavy, shifting slightly as if the room itself breathed with their presence. One leaned close, a shadowy hand extending, but vanished when he blinked. The whispers grew louder, voices repeating, "You are offline, forever," faint laughter, distant cries, and the echo of his own heartbeat filled the room. He tried to stand, to escape, but his legs felt frozen. Every puzzle he solved, every click he made had merged him further with the game. Time itself stretched unnaturally, the room twisting, objects duplicating, shadows growing heavier. The massive black ghosts pulsed subtly, dominating the space, each one terrifying in a distinct way. And then, he realized the horrifying truth. The game wasn't just on the laptop. It had consumed his reality, and there was no going back. Every corner, every shadow, every pulse of fog, every subtle movement of the apartment confirmed it. He was trapped inside the game, offline, forever. Asterisk. He screamed, but no sound came out. The echo of his own panic was swallowed by the thick, curling fog that filled the apartment. Every move he tried to make was already predicted, controlled, and mirrored by the supernatural force consuming his reality. The room had become a labyrinth of horror, walls stretching, corners darkening, shadows twisting unnaturally. Massive black ghosts filled the space, each uniquely terrifying. A towering humanoid with hollow eyes leaned from a corner, clawed hands stretched unnaturally, a floating, half-formed torso drifted over the floor, face jagged and grotesque, a hovering mass with glowing cracks pulsed slowly near the ceiling. Smaller shadowy figures darted silently among objects, whispering incoherent threats. Each one reacted differently to his movements, surrounding him like a living trap. Objects in the apartment obeyed the game's dark logic, cups toppled before he touched them, chairs slid, picture frames crashed. The laptop glowed violently with twisted, unreadable symbols, flashing the ominous words, "You are offline forever." His reflection in the window shattered into dozens of hollow-eyed versions of himself, each blinking independently, watching him. The fog thickened, curling around furniture and creeping along the walls. The massive black ghosts shifted constantly, moving unpredictably. One would vanish into the fog and reappear behind him, another would lean close, almost touching, only to dissolve into shadows. The entire apartment felt alive, breathing, responding to the game, and feeding on his terror. Time lost all meaning. Seconds stretched into minutes, objects duplicated, shadows multiplied. Whispers filled the room from every corner, and even inside his own mind. He realized the horrifying truth: the game wasn't just a game. It had merged with reality, bending the world to its will, consuming him completely. He tried to run, but his feet were rooted, his arms heavy. Every direction he turned, every escape he imagined was already predicted. The massive ghosts closed in, yet each scene remained unpredictable, different forms, positions, actions, each one uniquely terrifying. Fog swirled around him, thick, cold, and suffocating, carrying faint cries and laughter. Finally, he stopped struggling. Every corner, every shadow, every pulse of fog and movement of the ghosts confirmed it. He was trapped. He was part of the game. Reality and the supernatural had fused, and there was no way out. The thick, massive, black ghosts dominated every inch of the apartment, reflections twisted endlessly, fog enveloped everything. He was offline forever. The game had won. Today's second story, The Whistling Shadow. It started quietly, almost innocuously. A soft whistle echoed through the empty corridors of his apartment building, distant but strangely precise. At first, he thought it was the wind, or maybe a neighbor playing some late-night prank. But the sound persisted, repeating at irregular intervals, always moving closer, then retreating. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was nothing. Yet something in the tone chilled him, high-pitched, almost human, yet unnaturally distorted. Every time he paused, the whistle seemed to adjust, moving with him, tracking his every step. The hallways, once familiar, now felt strange and oppressive. The cool night air seeped in through cracks, fog curling along the floor and around corners, thickening with each passing minute. Each distant echo of the whistle made the building feel alive, listening and waiting. As he walked, shadows in the dim lights flickered unnaturally. The staircase seemed longer, the walls slightly stretched. Every familiar object, potted plants, signs, even handrails, looked subtly different, slightly off, as if the building itself was bending around the sound. His heart raced. He paused at the end of the corridor, straining to pinpoint the source. The whistle repeated again, softer now, almost teasing, a sound he felt rather than heard. It was close, yet he saw nothing, and yet he felt watched. Every step forward intensified the sensation. His reflection in the elevator door flickered, not just his own face, but multiple versions, pale and hollow-eyed, all staring back. The whistle's rhythm seemed to match his heartbeat, growing faster as he approached each empty corridor. Fear built gradually, suffocatingly. He realized the sound wasn't random. It followed him, anticipating his moves, guiding him deeper into the hallways. Every turn he took, every pause he made, seemed orchestrated by an invisible presence, patient and watchful. By now, ignoring the sound was impossible. Every instinct told him to run, yet every step forward felt drawing, inevitable. The whistle had become a force he could neither escape nor fully understand, a signal, a lure, and a warning all at once. And then he knew this was not the wind, not a neighbor. Something else was here, something patient, waiting, whistling just for him. Asterisk. Night after night, the sound returned. Always the same rhythm, soft, haunting, impossible to ignore. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but the whistle persisted, distant yet strangely precise, echoing through the empty corridors of his apartment building. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was nothing, but the instinctive chill in his spine said otherwise. Every time he paused to listen, the sound seemed to move with him, closer and closer, weaving through the hallways, twisting around corners, vanishing when he tried to approach. The building, once familiar, now felt unfamiliar and oppressive. Shadows stretched unnaturally under flickering lights, always felt longer, staircases slightly tilted, and the fog from the cooler night air crept thicker along the floor, curling around corners and creeping up the walls. Objects subtly shifted in his presence. Potted plants tilted as if avoiding something, signs swayed lightly, and doors creaked open or shut on their own. Every step he took seemed to be mirrored, anticipated, guided by an unseen force. He began noticing patterns. The whistle's rhythm would speed up as he paused, slow when he walked, almost communicating in a language he could not understand. His reflection in the elevator door or polished surfaces flickered unnaturally, sometimes showing hollow-eyed versions of himself staring back. His fear grew steadily, suffocating him. Sleep became impossible, the same rhythm haunted him even in his dreams, the invisible presence always lingering, always watching. His apartment felt like a trap, corridors bending, always stretching, as if the building itself was reshaping around the sound. Night after night, he became hyper-aware of every detail, the faintest creak, every whisper of wind, every shadow that moved against the light. He realized with mounting dread that the whistling wasn't random. It followed him, anticipating his steps, guiding him deeper into fear, orchestrating his paranoia. And then came the inevitable realization, this presence wasn't just outside him. It was close, patient, intelligent, feeding on his growing terror, existing just beyond perception. Something was following him, always there, always waiting, whistling, and it would not stop. Asterisk. One night, he turned the corner and saw it. A shadow figure, tall and faceless, standing perfectly still. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a tall coat rack, or some furniture distorted by the dim hallway lighting. But the soft whistle that had haunted him for nights now came clearly from that spot, echoing through the corridor with an impossible precision. His heart raced. He froze, every instinct screaming to run, yet his feet felt rooted to the floor. The figure did not move, yet the presence was immense, almost tangible, pressing against him from a distance. The whistle rose and fell rhythmically, unnervingly calm, almost as if it were alive, aware of him. He blinked, trying to shake the disbelief, telling himself it couldn't be real. But the air around him felt heavier, colder. The fog curling along the floor thickened, wrapping around the base of the walls and climbing slightly toward the ceiling. It moved unnaturally, responding to the figure, almost as if it were following an invisible rhythm. Every step he had taken that night, every cautious glance over his shoulder, had led to this moment. His reflection in the nearby polished elevator door flickered, dozens of hollow-eyed versions of himself stared back, each expression more terrified than the last. Time seemed to stretch. Each heartbeat thumped in his ears, synchronized with the whistle. The shadows around the hallway moved, stretching and bending, making it impossible to judge distance or space. The building, familiar yet alien, seemed to lean toward the figure as if guiding him into its presence. He wanted to look away, to flee, but couldn't. The figure's faceless form was unnerving, commanding attention, its posture unnaturally rigid. It didn't walk toward him or make any noise except the whistling, yet he felt its gaze, felt it measuring him, knowing him. And then a whisper of movement, something shifted behind the fog, a faint echo of footsteps that didn't belong to him. Every instinct screamed that he was not alone, that the figure wasn't the only thing in the hallway. He realized, with a cold dread, that the shadow had been waiting, patient, for him to notice. And now, it had, and it knew he had noticed. Asterisk. He ran to check the CCTV, desperate for proof. Every instinct told him he had to see it, to confirm that what he had felt wasn't just his imagination. The screens flickered to life, showing the usual empty corridors of his apartment building. Nothing. Not a shadow, not a flicker, not a sign of the tall faceless figure that had haunted his steps. His pulse pounded in his ears, the soft whistle echoing faintly even as he stared at the monitors. He replayed the footage, frame by frame, hoping for something, anything to validate what he had experienced. But the corridors were empty. The fog, the shifting shadows, the ominous silence all absent. Yet the whisper of the whistle persisted, almost as if it existed outside of the camera's lens, slipping past every electronic barrier, mocking him. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't imagining it. The hallway behind him seemed alive, stretching and twisting subtly. Each time he turned, expecting to see nothing, he felt a pressure, a weight, a presence just beyond sight. His reflection in the glass of the CCTV monitors flickered, hollow-eyed versions of himself blinking independently, each silently screaming in terror. The sound of footsteps, soft but deliberate, seemed to echo from nowhere. His apartment, familiar and safe just hours ago, now felt alien, hostile. The fog creeping along the floor outside the elevator doors and staircases thickened, curling unnaturally around furniture and objects. Every object seemed slightly moved from its place, tilting, sliding, subtly reacting to some unseen force. The whistle grew louder, more insistent, bouncing off the walls of the building in unpredictable ways. It no longer simply followed him, it anticipated his movements, guiding him, manipulating him, threading fear into every step he took. The lines between reality and perception blurred. He could feel the presence pressing closer, always behind, always patient, always whistling just for him. No CCTV footage could capture it. No logical explanation could account for it. The corridors, the fog, the silence, they were all part of a reality he could no longer trust. He realized, with a suffocating dread, that the unseen presence was not bound by cameras, walls, or distance. It existed where it pleased, and it was always right behind him. Asterisk. Every corner he turned, the whistle followed, soft, steady, closer each time. He'd spin around, find nothing, yet reflections in mirrors showed it waiting. Silent. Faceless. Patient. Watching him even when the hallway was empty. He tried to leave the building, but nothing worked. Every corridor he ran down twisted unnaturally, stretching longer, bending in ways that defied logic. Doors led him back to the same hallways, as if the building itself had become a trap. The whistle, once distant, now filled every corner, echoing off walls, vibrating through the floor, inside his head. Shadows thickened, stretching and twisting with impossible shapes, crawling along walls and ceilings. Panic consumed him as he realized, with suffocating dread, it wasn't following him. He was trapped inside it, inside the shadows world, inside the endless corridor, forever. Today's final story is the forgotten photo. It all began when he was cleaning out an old drawer in his apartment. Hidden beneath piles of bills and forgotten letters, he found a photograph, yellowed with age, edges curled, corners frayed. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, a picture of his own apartment building. But as he held it, a shiver ran down his spine. The hallways in the photo were subtly different, slightly distorted, bending in ways that didn't match his memories. He stared closer, trying to make sense of it. The lighting seemed wrong, shadows darker than they should have been. A faint blur in the corner caught his eye, something that resembled a figure, but it was too vague to be certain. His pulse quickened. It was just a photo, he told himself. A forgotten relic from someone else's life, or maybe an old snapshot he had completely ignored. Days passed, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time he walked through his apartment, always seemed longer, corners slightly off, like the building itself had subtly changed. Doors he was sure were locked appeared slightly ajar. Shadows flickered where there shouldn't be any, almost like echoes of the shapes in the photograph. He started noticing details in the photo that weren't there before. A small hand pressed against a window, faces blurred beyond recognition, eyes seeming to stare directly at him. His dreams became restless, filled with fleeting glimpses of that same hallway, twisting and shifting, always leading him back to the spot where the photo had been found. Even friends noticed it. When he showed the picture, they said it looked like a normal, old photograph, nothing strange. But for him, something about it was alive, almost sentient, waiting, watching. He couldn't put it down, couldn't ignore it, and deep down, he knew whatever was captured in that photo was far from ordinary. It was just the beginning. Night after night, the sound returned. At first, it was faint, a soft echo that seemed to drift through the empty hallways of his apartment. But each night, the rhythm grew clearer, more deliberate, closer, almost as if it was tracking his every move. He would pause, heart pounding, straining to hear, but see nothing. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, every corner hiding something just beyond perception. Doors he passed rattled lightly as if a breeze, or something else, had touched them. The air itself felt heavier, charged, and he couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching him from places he couldn't reach. Hallway lights flickered, casting brief, warped shapes on the walls that vanished when he looked directly. The feeling of being followed gnawed at him, relentless, patient. Every step, every turn, brought the same chilling certainty, he was never truly alone. Something unseen stopped him, invisible yet undeniably present, a constant, haunting weight that made even familiar places feel alien and dangerous. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, but the rhythm, the presence, the dread, it was real, and it was growing stronger each night. One night, he turned the corner and froze. A tall, faceless shadow stood perfectly still, whistling, staring directly at him. He ran to check the CCTV, desperate for proof. The footage showed nothing. The corridor was empty, but he could still hear it whistling right behind him. Every corner he turned, every darkened room, he felt it. The whistling never stopped, soft at first, then growing louder, echoing unnaturally around him. It waited, patient, relentless, always present, just out of reach. Sometimes, He could catch glimpses of it in reflections, in mirrors, glass surfaces, even polished furniture moving independently, even when the corridor appeared empty. Every instinct screamed danger, and the apartment, once familiar, now felt alien, haunted by an unseen, ever-watchful presence that toyed with his mind. He tried to leave, but the corridors twisted unnaturally. Every door led back to the same hallways. And then he realized it wasn't following him. He was trapped inside it forever. That was the end of episode 29 of Dynamic Dark. If you enjoyed these terrifying stories, make sure to comment below which story scared you the most. The best comment will be pinned by me, Aditya. So, don't forget to like, subscribe, and enable notifications bell if you dare to see what comes next. And share with your friends and family too. Or you can suggest a topic for the next episode, like a foreign urban legend, haunted place, or any other creepy horror story. The suggestion with the most likes might be featured in the next episode. Until then, keep listening to terrifying stories, because we'll be back soon with episode 30. And in the next episode, we'll bring you creepypasta horror stories. Yes, an English episode this time. Stay tuned and keep watching the horror episodes of Dynamic Dark. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new horror episode. New fears, new darkness, and new secrets. Join the Dynamic Dark family with 3 brand new terrifying stories.